fidgeted!
The EVO 16 is a 24-in, 24-out audio interface with 8 channels directly on the unit, with the remaining 16 accessible through digital expansion. The whole purpose of the EVO range of interfaces is to make recording easy, and with its unique smart gain feature that automatically sets the mic gain while you play, the EVO 16 is perfect for drummers or anyone using more than just 1 or 2 microphones at a time who may be performing away from the interface. So we're going to put that to the test today. As a disclaimer, Audient sent us the EVO 16 for review, however we were not paid for this review, and so as always our honest opinions are based on time spent using this interface. First of all, the physical interface itself. The EVO 16 looks great. As Audient themselves said on their website, who says an interface has to look utilitarian? And they're right, it's nice to see an interface on the sleeker side of things. The unit measures 355mm wide, 255mm deep and 53mm high, so it's small enough and light enough to fit onto any desk, but still sizable enough that you can use it as a laptop stand if you're a little pushed for space. Handily, the EVO 16 also fits nicely into a 1U rack using the rack ears, which are an optional extra but a free one. By default, the interface doesn't come with them to save the polar bears thanks to having less weight to ship, but Audient will happily throw them in for free if you choose to include them. I really love the fact that they're taking into account the extra unnecessary weight used in shipping parts like these that not everyone will get a use for, meaning a more efficient ecosystem and less wastage. Taking a look at the features, on the front of the unit we see the ever popular one knob design, which controls all the functionality of the interface, along with a high quality screen, channel selection buttons, a phantom power button, instrument input selection button, as well as a dedicated EVO function button, monitoring selection buttons, and finally 2 XLR TRS combi inputs. On the rear we find the remaining 6 XLR TRS combi inputs, 8 line outputs using TRS sockets, a word clock and 2 optical inputs and outputs for expansion, making it possible to record everything from a solo vocalist to a drum kit to an entire band. Each button controls a function, however there is also accompanying PC and Mac software to remotely control the interface. Before recording anything with the EVO, let's quickly cover how it's used. Connection to the interface is made via the included USB A to C cable, but of course it will work on a USB C to C cable too if you have one of those lying around. I'll be connecting my monitors into the jacks on the rear of the unit, however I found the connectors to be ever so slightly too close together. If you have reasonably chunky TRS connectors such as the ones with Nutric connectors on the end that I've used in every interface so far, the bulge on the connectors pushes the cables apart, meaning it's putting strain on the sockets on the rear of the interface. It's well within the realms of safety. You're not going to be snapping any connectors, but I would love to see another 2 or 3mm of separation between the connectors on future revisions of this model, just to give clearance for chunkier connectors. Upon first connecting the interface, I was asked if I'd like to sign up to Arc, Audient's creative hub in which you can find free plugins and so on. In order to do this, I had to navigate what is possibly the laggiest interface I've ever seen. Even typing my name, email and password took me a good 10 minutes, and then I was faced with the never-ending "I'm not a robot" loading circle. In fact, my entire computer actually ground to a halt when using this login screen, then snapped back to its normal speed upon completing the form. Not only this, but the software control for the internal mixer and routing also lagged to an unusable level. I was assured by Audient that this is not a regular occurrence, and they were looking into rare edge cases on certain Ryzen CPU based computers. To avoid using a Ryzen computer, as I don't own any Intel based PCs, I tried the interface on my MacBook Pro, but was unable to use it at all. The interface didn't appear on Logic's audio device selection menu, and also didn't appear in the macOS sound options page in system preferences. It was also impossible to open the software control for the interface. The option just wasn't there. After a while of troubleshooting with Audient's very helpful support team, we managed to get the interface detected and connected perfectly to my MacBook, but unfortunately didn't succeed with the Ryzen-based Windows PCs, so the rest of the review will be conducted on the MacBook Pro. So how does the interface handle? Thankfully, very well indeed. The interface is really easy to learn and there are plenty of buttons on the front to allow for ease of access to all the functions. Sure, there are a few hidden functions behind menus, but after spending only a short time with the interface, it was really easy to remember where everything was. A big positive is that at least the buttons have some kind of label. A major gripe for certain other interfaces I've used in the past is when you're presented with numerous unlabeled buttons with absolutely no indication as to what they actually do. It's very much a fumbling around kind of approach. Luckily, the EVO 16 avoids this. The first buttons we come to are the channel selection buttons. All the buttons on the interface feel high quality, and the 8 buttons we can see on the left are used to select the active channel for adjusting parameters. A quick push on one of these buttons selects the channel and displays the current preamp gain level on the built-in screen. Pushing and holding a channel selection button mutes that channel's input signal. A muted channel is denoted by the white LED indicator on the button slowly flashing. To unmute a channel, just push and hold the channel button again and the signal throughput will resume. To the right of these buttons, we find the phantom power button. Pushing the button lights up the 48-volt sign with a red indicator, and the screen shows a small ghostly phantom icon, which I absolutely love. Switching between channels with phantom on and those with phantom off updates this button's display state in real time. Up next is the instrument input selector. Pushing this will change the selected channel's input impedance to allow for instruments such as electric guitars to be recorded through the TRS section of the combi inputs. Once again, visual feedback is great as both the button and the display screen reflect the change in input state. If you have a channel in instrument mode and you try to apply phantom, you'll see a little angry ghost icon on the display telling you off for being such a fool, making you question your existence as a sound engineer and telling you it's probably time for a nice British cup of tea. For the rest of the buttons, the monitor speaker button and the buttons labelled 1 and 2 to the right of it allow you to choose whether the rotary knob is controlling your main monitors or one of the 2 headphone outputs. Clicking one of these buttons will update the display screen accordingly to show the applied monitoring volume level, ranging from 0 to 100. Pushing and holding these buttons will mute the monitoring. The F button below the monitor selection button allows you to activate the user definable function. By default, it switches the selected monitor output between mono and stereo playback. Moving on to the knob on the front, and as with most interfaces nowadays, this is multifunctional. Twisting this main knob changes the monitoring level according to which output is selected between speakers, headphone 1 or headphone 2, as expected. Clicking the knob inwards allows us to explore the monitoring displays offered by the EVO 16. The first is output monitoring, showing the aforementioned speaker and headphone outputs. The second page is digital outputs, showing outputs 1 to 8, and finally the digital outputs 9 to 16 are on the third page. This selection of outputs is only available if the speaker or headphone selection buttons have been pressed. If the last selected button was a preamp input channel, then the input monitoring pages will display instead, switching between the 8 analog inputs and then 2 further groups of 8 digital inputs, just like the aforementioned outputs monitoring layout. Pushing and holding the knob will take us into the interface's main menu. The first option is power, giving us the choice to turn off the interface. In order to turn the interface back on again, just click the knob inwards. No remembering how to power on and off, you just click it. Something I would love to see on not only this interface but also every other interface is a dedicated power button. I'm not really sure why this is something that's almost always missing from interfaces, but just being able to turn the system on and off with a single button just like our Focusrite Claret 8 preamps would be a real time saver. The next option down is brightness. If you're in a dark room, then the powerful LEDs on this device will be way too much for comfort, so you can easily turn down the level of both the screen and button brightness. Interestingly, when the knob is turned all the way up to maximum brightness, you can actually hear a high-pitched humming from the physical unit when all the lights are illuminated, but then this humming disappears when you quit the menu. Strange. Next, we can choose the function buttons mode. As I mentioned earlier, by default it toggles your speaker output between a choice of mono or stereo, but you can also change this between speaker dimming, alternate speaker selection, and talkback. The talkback feature can be further customized within the software, but we'll come to that shortly. Up next is the status page, showing the current sample rate as well as the digital input selections. By default, they're set to ADAT. Finally, the factory reset button is at the bottom, allowing us to reset all the configurations. On the software side of things, an easy to understand interface with direct monitoring faders makes up the main user interface. You can choose between the analog inputs, digital inputs and DAW return inputs to be displayed on the main mixer, as well as the DAW return outputs, meaning you have completely flexible control over what you're monitoring with a separate mixer screen for each of the Q-Mix outputs. Each channel has the expected solo and mute functions, and the super low latency listening allows for a great monitoring experience. There are also various options within the software to reroute inputs and outputs on the digital sockets, and an option to choose an analog or digital input as a talkback microphone input. Finally, the Audient EVO 16's killer feature, Smart Gain. The genius solution for setting up for a multi-track recording in under 20 seconds. What is it exactly? Pushing the green button on the front panel and selecting the channels you want to use with Smart Gain will automatically adjust the gain of the preamp input as you play, adjusting the levels to give the best signal to noise ratio for the best recording quality. This feature is perfect for musicians such as drummers who may have 8 microphones on their kit and want to get everything set up ready for recording, but stopping to adjust each mic gain, then playing again and repeating this process many times is a very slow and boring process. Smart Gain adjusts all the selected microphones at once, meaning you can play the drums and set the gain to an almost perfect level in no time at all. This also counts for full bands. Maybe a drummer is on channels 1 to 4, bass on 5, guitar is on 6, and 2 vocalists on 7 and 8. Everyone can play at once and all their recording levels will be set in just a few seconds. At least, all of this works on paper. Much to the disappointment of myself, Mark, and our drummer Dan Garcia, who came down to PDP headquarters to record for this very video, we couldn't get the Smart Gain system to actually work, nor could we actually get the interface to consistently record 8 channels of microphone level audio into Logic at all. So what went wrong? Firstly, let's jump to some behind the scenes setup footage to see how we went about trialing the EVO 16 at Present Day Production HQ.
So we're doing the Glen Johns technique with Dan here. He's playing drums for us today. 3 very important ingredients for the Glen Johns drum mic technique. Ingredient number 1 is drummer and kit. Ingredient number 2 is some microphones. Ingredient number 3 is this tape measure. You need a tape measure, not sponsored by Maplin because they've gone bust. So what we need to do is, in order to correctly align the phase between various parts of the kit and the microphones, is we need to align the overhead microphone, which in this case is a single Lewitt LCT 1040 with this fish. Hold the fish. 900 yards. Now, don't move the fish, I've just measured it. Then the second microphone, which is looking over the thing of the tom, the top of it, the hitty bit.
The camera work is as bad as your mic technique.
Wait, shut up! I'm trying to do a serious tutorial. Which is also a Lewitt LCT 1040. We need to measure the distance between that microphone and this gimped up bear. That's 3 hours 20 minutes.
Fantastic.
Now we need to compute a calculation. Don't move the fish! Perfect. Ready to record.
When trying to use the Smart Gain, 6 out of 8 channels would repeatedly fail to set the gain and only 2 would consistently succeed. We swapped those mics onto different channels and again those 2 mics succeeded on their new channel inputs. So after various changes of mic choices and mic input order on the interface, we were still having the same issue. No matter which mics we chose, the only microphones that would give us anything higher than a 0% success rate was the pair of Lewitt LCT 1040s we had on overheads. We tried every combination of microphones and preamp inputs for each microphone and just had no luck at all. I'm absolutely positive that there wasn't any overloading of the preamps, and that the reason it failed was not that it couldn't turn it down any lower than the bass preamp gain of -8 decibels, as we asked our drummer Dan to play a variety of styles from heavy rock through to the lightest tinkering of jazz, and nothing was successful, no matter the sound levels going into the microphones and preamps, nor the configuration of each microphone into any random assortment of preamp orders. Our second, even bigger problem was that we couldn't consistently get the interface to record at all. We tried for 4 hours to get something to work, both with smart gain and just me generally trying to get some kind of audio into the computer, but we couldn't get it to consistently input 8 channels. All 8 channels were set up as they should have been going into Logic, and we'd sometimes get channel 4 and 5 putting audio through, sometimes nothing, sometimes channel 1, 4, 5, 7 and 8. It was impossible to get any repeatable results for which inputs would actually transmit audio to the DAW and which ones wouldn't, so we can't narrow down what was actually causing this to happen. We were using a fresh installation of the latest version of Logic on the latest version of Mac OS on my MacBook Pro, which was working fine during initial testing of the interface whilst writing the beginning of this video. But when we moved to multi-track recording, these issues started to rear their heads. I can somewhat rule out smart gain not being the issue for having no signal, as I also tried manually setting the preamp gain and I was still getting no signal whatsoever going into the Mac, accompanied by numerous trawls through Logic's many menus to try and find any culprit settings, of which there were none. After emailing the Audient team with a long message explaining my issues with the interface's functionality, I received a call from them only 2 hours later with a fix. I applied the recommended update to the unit and this seems to have fixed all the issues. From this point onwards, the Smart Gain feature does indeed allow for completely automated gain control, and in my testing since the update re-enabled the functionality, it has set the gain at around -12 dBFS each time, which is a perfect level for a great signal to noise ratio with enough headroom to still allow for some shouting and raised volume levels. The rest of the evaluation of the interface was continued on the Mac, as mentioned earlier, as there still hasn't been any success with getting my Ryzen-based PC to work so far. Again, it's worth restating that these issues are claimed by Audient to be extremely rare edge cases, and we do own a few bits of Audient kit throughout our studio and we've never had any issues before now, and the Audient team were extremely apologetic about the issues we were having and have apparently never had these issues before. So I'd be willing to say I was just extremely unlucky during this testing, and that Audient's renowned high quality is still up there. It's just a case of new software misbehaving with new computer hardware for a few select users. But having a great customer service team means that any issues can hopefully be resolved in no time at all, so it's not all bad news. So once it's working, how does it sound? The whole point of this interface is to take all the annoying game-based struggles out of recording and just get you ready to go in no time. The theory behind it is genius, and once the software issues were out of the way, this interface is well equipped and it's got a fantastic sound. It's a little bass heavy, perhaps by about 2 decibels below 200 Hz, but the general detail coming from the converters is really great, and it easily matches the sound quality of the vast array of interfaces we have around the studio for comparison. Recording on my MacBook Pro with just a 32 sample buffer size in Logic allowed me to get latencies as low as 3 milliseconds using a USB connection, so those who are sensitive to latency might find this interface suitable, but for even lower latency, you can monitor from the internal mixer software if that floats your boat. If you're in a professional studio and you're looking for a multi-channel interface with expandability, a great sound and intelligent features to help you out, I do recommend you check this interface out, but please also research the compatibility with your particular computer specification just to be sure, particularly if you're running a Ryzen-based Windows PC. Audient have once again created a great bit of hardware with a cool auto gain feature, and despite the initial hiccups with the usability, it's such an easy to use interface that you could easily set it up without even reading the manual, and even a massive technophobe like Mark could use it, which is a huge statement considering it's got a multi-function knob, which I believe may be his ultimate nemesis. So for a 24 input, 24 output interface with intelligent gain control and much more, how much money are we talking about? When we met Chris and Andy from Audient at the Sound on Sound Gearfest event last month, they gave us a run through all of the features of the EVO 16, and the first figure that popped into my head was around £800 to £1,000. That seemed reasonable. Something with so many inputs and outputs, along with its flexibility and generally awesome features, can't be found for a small amount of money. And I was most definitely shocked and genuinely left open-mouthed when Andy told me it's a mere £399. How you can cram that amount of functionality into something a quarter of the price of equally specified units from Focusrite and Antelope, I'm not sure, but that's the magic. It's affordable enough for almost everyone to be able to afford, opening up larger, more complex recordings for the masses. I'm impressed. So, how did our drum session go? Well, unfortunately, we had to resort back to our trusty Focusrite Claret 8 Pre-X for the session, and if you would like to get your hands on those recordings for use in your own sessions, then head over to Dan Garcia's website for more info. We'll link to that in the description, and we'd like to say a huge thank you to Dan for coming down for the day. It's just a shame we couldn't record him with the EVO 16. Thanks for watching this video, and to find out more about the importance of gain staging and signal to noise ratio, click on the video popping up on your screen in just a moment. Please remember to like, subscribe and ding the ding dong, and you'll see us in the next video.